I was watching Secular Talk the other day, and Kyle Kulinski made a startling admission.
Well, again, I hate to keep bringing these points up, but you have to. People accuse the show of being repetitive. Guilty. Because the issues are the same. They haven't changed.
To say that Kyle's show is repetitive is an understatement. More accurately, I'd say that Kyle only has about 5 or 6 different arguments that he recycles from story to story. He might just be the most predictable person on YouTube. Now this leaves us with 2 possibilities. Either the world is exactly as simple as Kyle portrays it, and he has it all figured out, or the world is incredibly complicated and Kyle just has a very simple-minded approach to everything. I'm going to go with option number 2. Kyle likes to think of himself as extremely practical. He isn't concerned with the fake scandals or Washington gossip. No, he is a deep thinker, a data-driven policy guy. Or at least he's always purported to be.
Because you guys know, man, I'm an economics nerd, a politics nerd, a philosophy nerd, a current events nerd, and that's how this, show has come about and how I've done it so consistently and all the time.
In my opinion, his analysis of politics is pretty lackluster. For a guy who does a news show 5 days a week, has a degree in political science, and is a self-proclaimed policy wonk, Kyle is stunningly superficial. One of his pet peeves since the election of Donald Trump is when people on the left applaud Republicans who criticize the president's rhetoric. Of course, he sees these people as nothing more than useful idiots.
There were so many people who are Democrats, and I saw it all over Twitter, who were praising Jeff Flake and saying, "Oh, yes, finally Republicans standing up to Donald Trump. Welcome to the resistance." Somebody literally said that. "Welcome to the resistance, Jeff Flake."
They are merely being fooled by Republicans like Ben Sasse, Bob Corker, and Jeff Flake. After all, these guys vote with Trump so consistently. Clearly their concerns about the president's language are irrelevant and/or insincere.
I know it's difficult to actually try to be objective and look at their records, their fucking voting records, which is all that should matter when you talk about politics. It should be the only thing that matters when you talk about politics. But let's go ahead and take a look and see what Jeff Flake has been up to. Oh, wowzers. Would you look at that? Jeff Flake voted with Donald Trump 90% of the time. 90% of the time. 90% of the time. So Jeff Flake takes the, are you really part of the resistance test, and he scores a fucking 10%. That's what he gets. It's like he sit down and took a test to determine, hey, are you really part of the resistance? Are you voting against him? And he got a fucking 10% on that test. And corporate Democrats are coming all over themselves, acting like this guy's a hero.
I love the veneer of hard evidence he presents here. When you break it down, though, this so-and-so votes with Trump X% of the time argument falls apart pretty quickly. 538 calculates this score by taking all the roll call votes cast by a congressman or senator, and comparing how they line up with what Trump ostensibly wants. The problem with this metric is that all of the votes a politician casts are weighted equally. If you vote to rename a post office and Trump signs off on that, yet you voted against the major tax legislation passed last year, you would have a 50% score on the Trump tracker. No thinking person believes that those two votes are the same in consequence. The vast majority of votes Congress makes are either uncontroversial, irrelevant, or on procedural matters. Just take a look at the roll call votes website sometime if you don't believe me. The fact is the Trump tracker is a quantitative measure, and Kyle is using it to make a qualitative judgment. If this logic held, then Kyle is wrong to think that there's a significant difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. After all, according to govtrack.us, those two voted alike 93.1% of the time when they served in the Senate together. Also, who cares if a senator, or anyone for that matter, agrees with Trump? This is the old Hitler was a vegetarian argument. Agreeing with somebody on something doesn't mean you are endorsing their worst qualities. Even Kyle agrees with Trump on certain things.
Let's be crystal clear, that is a flat-out liberal thing to say. He's making a liberal argument. And this is why, I've been arguing since the beginning, and many others on the left have been arguing since the beginning. It's not enough to simply say, we are the resistance and we are opposing Donald Trump. Because if you oppose everything he says, then every now and then you're going to look like a jackass. Because sometimes, for example, he'll say, we're going to do infrastructure. We're going to stop spending all the money overseas, and we're going to start rebuilding stuff at home. We're going to stop going into countries and nation building when we don't have to do it, and we're going to do stuff here at home. We're going to save Social Security. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're not going to cut Medicare. So if you play the role of loyal reactionary opposition, every now and then you will be taking the conservative side. which is why you have to be intelligent and rational and actually policy-focused when you're jousting with somebody like Donald Trump, who's a complete and utter wild card, and every now and then says something reasonable.
Should he not support the president when they're on the same page just to thwart the man's agenda? To do so would be to subordinate your conception of good policy to Trump and his supporters, which would ironically give them more power. If Kyle won't abandon his principles and values just to resist the president, why should a conservative senator? In fact, this is exactly how Jeff Flake explained his voting record.
I will agree with this president when I think he's right and oppose him when I think he's wrong. I think he has been wrong on free trade. His talk about NAFTA and in the campaign talking about getting rid of it. I'm glad that that's moved to renegotiation. I hope we simply modernize it and move ahead. But like any Republican or Democratic president, myself and I suppose other senators will keep our franchise and not be a rubber stamp.
Now, Kyle is free to say that these people are supporting bad policy, but he cannot say they're cucking to Trump just because of their voting record. I'm genuinely curious how Kyle would answer this question. What would it look like for Jeff Flake or Ben Sasse or Bob Corker to resist the president short of demanding impeachment hearings? The fact is, it's possible to like the president's cabinet picks and say that he shouldn't be tweeting. It is possible to like his picks for the judiciary and say that he's behaving undiplomatically. It is possible to want to cut taxes and to think that the president is temperamentally unfit for office. Furthermore, who is voting with whom? Does anyone take seriously the proposition that Trump actually has in-depth policy ideas? Of course he doesn't. The man can't speak a coherent sentence on policy. Plus, he's all over the place. The only position that he's ever been consistent on is his protectionism.
Anyone who has worked for this president says he is entirely transactional and his ideology is fluid, except on trade.
If you look at the legislation that has been passed in the last year, you'll see that the White House has deferred to Congress, not the other way around. Trump's populist agenda, to the extent that it ever existed, has largely gone by the wayside. What sort of legislation has been passed? Well, we have corporate tax cuts and have implemented a territorial tax system, which is the exact opposite of what economic nationalist Steve Bannon wanted. Also, we have no wall, no infrastructure plan, and we still have all of our foreign policy commitments in place. The only real populist agenda item being advanced is the new tariff regime, which, of course, is working as poorly as expected. It's much more accurate to say that Trump has voted with Jeff Flake than it is to say that Jeff Flake has voted with Trump. The funny thing is, Kyle has even acknowledged that Trump has governed in an establishment way.
Donald Trump, even though he ran a somewhat populist campaign and he acted like, you know, the forgotten man will never be forgotten again. And so that's the angle he had to take. The angle he took was like, I'm against the establishment, I'm with the people. That's how he portrayed himself. Now, of course, his policies are the exact opposite of that. His policies are for the establishment.
It's weird, because I like so much of the policy from the Trump administration, yet I hate the rhetoric, whereas Kyle hates most of the policy, yet he doesn't care about the way the president speaks. I understand that Kyle has different opinions on policy, and that he's going to fight for that. But there's more to politics than policy. And the fact of the matter is, Trump is not a policy guy. He is a cultural figure. The tweeting, the rallies, the railing against the press, this is what people love about him, and it's what people hate about him. There has been a lot more noise than legislation from this president. That is what he is known for, and that is what a few of his fellow Republicans are most critical of. When the president says stupid, illiberal, undiplomatic things, when he tells blatant lies, when he attacks our democratic institutions, it's important that people criticize him, especially people from his own party. Frankly, I wish more people would speak up. And yes, it matters what the president says, not just the laws he passes. But Kyle doesn't think so.
All that matters is policy when you talk about politics.
Because he doesn't get it.